Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is game 3 from the FIDE Women's World Chess Championship match 2025. Ju Wenjun has the white pieces in this one, trailing Tan Zhongyi half, 1.5. Opens with e4. We have another Sicilian Defense. We follow game 1 of this match until move 3. In game 1 we saw d4. This time around it's c4, the c pawn, an early contributor in this game 3. This is the Kramnik variation. Black continues with knight c6, d4 only now, and this trio is immediately broken up. C takes d4 is played here. If you don't remove that pawn, d5 is there, and you have to work around that pawn forever. The knight, your developed knight, has to find a new home. Forget about that. Not happening. C takes d it is. Knight takes d. Now we carry on with more development. Bishop b4 check it is. Knight c3 and knight g to e7. So an interesting post for the knight. This grabbed my attention for sure. Knight e7, knight f6. What's a difference or two between these posts? For one, you can consider meeting knight takes knight with a recapture, replacing that piece. Also, in some cases, black could maybe consider playing f5, striking white's center. So it's a flexible post there on e7. From here, bishop e2. Black plays d5, e takes d, and a pair of knights comes off, followed by castles. So this knight now back to full strength, out of the pin, both sides castles. C takes d, c takes d. This is now the focus, this isolated, this passed d pawn. Bishop f3, 3 attackers, only 2 defenders. Here comes a third defender. And after bishop g5, we're ready to now crash through his white. Chop on e7, chop on d5, and we're winning a pawn. Bishop for knight exchange, so an imbalance here. Dark square bishop versus knight. With that exchange, we can now say all queenside pawns are isolated. Black targets that weak pawn straight away. And white says, go ahead and take it. White is prepared to meet rook takes c with queen takes a. Would it be a good idea for black to allow that exchange of pawns? Probably not. To allow white this outside pass pawn, and we're tending towards, what is this, a middle game ending? As that end game approaches, if we're not already there, the outermost pass pawn is typically more valuable. So black does not bite. Instead, questions the bishop. Now, the knee-jerk reaction to this will frequently be, I'll just back off and maintain that pin. Hang on. In that case, if you play bishop h4, there's rook c4. That's going to be painful. Fork there on the 4th rank. It's not the loss of a piece, by the way. In the game, bishop d2 is played, babysitting the c-pawn. But just to highlight here, if bishop h4, it wouldn't be the loss of a piece. There is this move, bishop takes e7, but what's happening here is that black is getting this really quick pressure on this pretty much half-dead c-pawn. So, not a good idea to meet h6 with bishop h4. Bishop d2 it is in this game. In comes a5. That's a convenient way to defend the a-pawn. The queen is cool, working from home base. Rook e1. Notice black already has a flight square. So what may run through one's mind right around this point is, okay, maybe I should get my flight square in. Is this the moment to insert a flight square? Not really. Typically, you go with that You invest time for that flight square once you've optimized your pieces, or at least they're semi-active. There's still more work to be done here as white. Neither rook is a contributor just yet. So normally those flight squares are flicked in once. It's kind of tricky to see how exactly am I to improve a piece? We're not quite there yet. Rook f to e1 it is. Rook c4, queen a3, knight f5, rook, get out of my house. Rook c8 it is, and rook a to d1. So nice and central here, the white rooks. Queen d6. Now, offering a queen exchange, what we're going to have from here is the trade of a-pawns in just a handful of moves. Something I want to draw some attention to is this maneuver here, knight d6. This is typically a very good square for the knight. Knight d6 into c4. What are we doing in response to something like that as white? I don't think this would be a good plan for black. And let me sort of demonstrate why I think this. It's because this dark square bishop could take up a very strong post here on d4. Now, computer, if you look at the evaluation, it's going to say the game's a draw, just, play another game. This one's over. But for humans here, if there's a side that's for choice, it would definitely be white. Opposite colored bishop position, there isn't a better square for white's dark square bishop. Convenient defender of this isolated pawn, good attacker, defender. It doesn't get better than this. White would be the one maybe pressing in such a position. You can maybe consider somehow coordinating with that dark square bishop. Queen, rook. Not a good idea to allow that exchange in this strong bishop post on d4. So we don't see knight d6 here. It's the offer of a queen exchange, and it's declined. Queen takes a, rook a8, queen b4. Rook takes a, follows. Wouldn't be a good idea to initiate the queen exchange, because we would be working with passed pawns, white with the outermost passed pawn. So something like this, dynamic position ahead. We have this dynamic duo here, the bishop pair. Not a good environment, not a good structure to take on as black. So no queen exchange here on b4. Rook takes a, no passed pawns, just isolated pawns here. Bishop f4, once more encouraging the capture on b4. Once more, it's declined. Bishop b5, queen b6. Don't forget, there's a mate and two threat here. Okay, let's offset this super active rook. Rook e2 it is. Rook's doubled. Bishop d3, offering a queen exchange, threatening to win the queen. Now a flashy move. Rook a1. The queen is poisoned here. In the game, rook 2 to e1 is played, taking care of the back rank. White doesn't have that flight square just yet. If you take the queen, how would this look? Well, there goes a rook. There goes another rook. And now you're in a pin, you're in a pickle, and another piece will soon be down for the count. So you don't have time to take the queen. Poison queen. Rook 2 to e1 in this game. Pair of rooks comes off, and now this threat is addressed. The queen goes back home. She has an eye on this diagonal here. All right, finally, get that flight square in. No more flashy moves there for Team Black. Queen f6. Rook e1 wasn't really doing anything on the d file. Rook on e1 now paves the way for bishop to e5. These bishops are, quite the pests. Let's see, queen g5, here we go. Bishop a6, bishop f4. These pieces are, where's the stable square for the black pieces? This is power of the bishops can question whichever piece. There's no safe color complex with the bishop pair. Queen f6, bishop b7, rook d8, bishop c7. Taking away a lot of ground from that rook. It goes to now f8. Position remains about equal. Now this pawn is targeted. How are you defending d5? Now, black's play from here moves in the forward. Queen g5 is played. Sharp move, one of the top moves. If you run in reverse to babysit the pawn, I just want to give you a feel for what the computer here has its eye on. Has its eye here on c4, meeting d takes c4 with bishop to d8. And there's this irritating pin all of a sudden on the knight. Okay. Sharp play. Wild bishops here in this open position. Black's response to rook d1, it is queen g5. Bishop takes d5. And now the follow-up here, knight e3. Sharp move. Fork. Discovered attack here on d5. What are you supposed to do now? Pawn takes knight. Bishop takes bishop. You have an isolated pawn. Also, black would have a target there on g2. Not easy to tame that light square bishop with the f pawn converted to the e file. No f3 to blunt that diagonal. Not allowed. No pawn takes knight here. Instead, the queen is questioned. h4. Got that covered. Now what? Where do you go with the queen? In the game, it's queen g4. If you play in a different way, let's say you back off, well, you no longer have pressure here. And the knight would simply fall. Also, if you play to f5, there's bishop captures bishop. And there's no time to take the rook, because the bishop would be on the queen. So the move here, queen g4. The queens are exchanged. No time to take the knight. There's this double attack now on the rook. Rook has to move. Rook d3 it is. Knight takes bishop. Rook takes knight. Finally, the smoke has cleared after that little skirmish there. Sharp play. Queen's long gone. Endgame on board. White is up a pawn, working with opposite colored bishops. In general, black should look forward to a rook exchange. White should really try and keep rooks on board if you're going to try and win this one. If the rooks are exchanged, the general method will be the king comes over to blockade the passed pawn, and the bishop will be cool to defend the kingside pawns. Construct the pawns on light, and the bishop is a convenient defender of those pawns. So let's see the try from here. Rook a8. Get some piece improvements. The kings need to both play a role now that there's no queens on board. The kings can feel comfortable getting activated. No time to take the pawn. Rook is under fire. Now the pawns are constructed for black here on light squares. The white king, meanwhile, is sneaking in towards the center on these dark squares. And let's get to an interesting point in the game. So this pawn here is held up nicely by the bishop. This is a very strong piece. I would say it doesn't really get much better than this post here for the bishop. Defends the king side base point. Watches over the passed pawn. Let's see how white tries to make progress here. Okay. Nearby, looking to advance a step, get rolling with that passed pawn. Bishop d5, bishop b6, rook a3, king d4, bishop e6, and from here we have bishop to c5. Now, if a different move is played here rather than bishop c5, for instance, let's say this is white's moment to start running with that passed pawn. Let's see why that may not be the best approach. If white played c4 here after king c5, what exactly are we doing with this bishop? You may think, well, I'll just go ahead and glue that bishop in and you can never break down this construction. That's true. But what would also be true is that white now lacks a convenient defender of f2, white's base point on the king's side. The bishop is the most efficient defender of that, and it would be cut off. So rook a2, and now you have, what are you doing about your f2 pawn? Not a good construction here for white with the bishop stuck on b6. It's sort of all in on the forward, doesn't have any defense. So probably not the best time to get running here with that passed pawn. So a little bit more regrouping. Bishop c5, king takes a step back, there we go, bishop's defending, f2, check flicked in, king e3, bishop e6, bishop d4. This is a perfect spot, at least for right now, for that bishop. c3 is defended, f2 will be defended. All right, king c6 from here. At this point, the pawn now starts to run. Back-to-back moves, c4, c5. Here's something I questioned. I wondered here, could black try to hold up the c4 advance altogether? In other words, put the rook right behind the pawn and just stay trained on that c4 square. I want to give you an idea here. I want to show you an idea that's available to white if you are simply focused on just this pawn advancing to c4. I want to show you how white can make progress here. Now, I'm not making the very best moves here, but I just want to show you an idea available to white. So let's say rook c2, and we just had these back and forth moves for black, allowing this king to get all the way over here, for instance. Here's an idea that's available to white. Rook check, king d6, and rook takes f7. This idea of an exchange sacrifice. This would be winning for white. F pawn falls, G pawn is ready to fall, H pawn ready to fall. This is something that black must factor in. This super active white king. So black does not try to hold up the c pawn. I mean, as it stands right now, okay, in this position here after king to c6, things are good with the pieces here for black. Again, doesn't get much better for the bishop here on e6. King is cool. The rook is active. Moment away from getting behind the passed pawn. Maybe watching over f2. Some constraint placed on the bishop. All right. The c pawn runs a couple steps. Things are still fine here for black. After c5, computer has its eye on some bishop d7, looking next at rook a4, offering that rook exchange. Again, desirable, a rook exchange for black. Black doesn't play in that way, plays bishop d5 here. Follow up now, king to f4. Let me throw this position to you as a pop quiz. What move would you play here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, in the game, bishop c6 is played, and this turns out to be a decisive error. This is a very important position Bishop c6 is paving the way for rook a4, but rook a4, there's a way out of that sort of skewer on the fourth rank. After bishop c6, king g5 is played. Now, what I want to show you here is the top move and sort of drawing idea that's available here to black. Some precision required by black at this point. Rook e2 is considered top. Now, what's going on with rook to e2? Well, there's this idea to next go to e4. If white responds to rook e2 in the same way as bishop c6, which is to say king g5, rook e4 is very strong. Now it's like, how do you make progress as white with this pin? You really cannot afford that rook exchange. Also, how do you disrupt? How would you disrupt this rook position? You could question the rook with f3, but the rook moves, and then you have to worry about this pawn. Let's say that actually played out, and f4 was here. The rook comes right back. Similar story on this fourth rank. There is a bishop check, but after king c6, there's a rook exchange right around the corner, as well as the idea to collect the passed pawn. There wouldn't be a great way out of this situation here as white. It's a very strong post, the black rook here on e4. Also some rook idea here, rook a4 into a7. The king could always take a step over. Rook b4, king c8, sticking around on light squares is cool. There's also another detail here. Again, if instead of the move in the game, bishop c6, rook e2 is played, this is something black had to calculate. If rook e2 is played and white doesn't play king g5 and instead tries to cut this rook off with bishop to e3, black would be in an only move situation here. That only move being f6, preventing this king from entering, cutting off these dark squares. This is considered a draw. Rook a4, there's rook a2, got that square covered. Rook d4, there's king c6. Also, this king doesn't have a move. You have to be very careful here as white, in fact, because of this last move f6. For instance, bishop d4 here, you're going to lose. There's rook e4 check, king f3. Rook takes bishop, discovered check. You're losing the whole farm. So, okay, no rook e2 played here. Bishop c6, decisive error. King continues to march. Rook a4 played now. How do you get out of this situation? Well, there's a timely check. And after the king moves, we avoid that rook exchange. The king here is slipping behind enemy lines. It's going to arrive eventually. On this g7 square, put pressure on that base point, further restricting black's pieces. Turns out this is not enough for black to have active pieces. It's very important. Factor in this king walk here to the f7 pawn. Follow up, king e6. Some more regrouping here. Bishop on a perfect square, gluing everything together here. Cannot be broken down. All right, the rook is now super active. Doesn't get much more active than this post right here. Pressure on the pawn. Everything is defended. Perfect construction here by white. Rook c2, again, very good pieces for black, but this king, super strong piece, really the star piece of this game here. It's going to find a way to enter. A little back and forth here, eventually coming up with a way to make forward progress. King is kicked away from its defensive G7. Now comes F3. Careful, Team Black, similar to that earlier variation where I had F6 put on. This king now has 0 options. A restriction on the bishop. You move the bishop, rook F6 would be mate. So you don't really have a wide range of options now as Black, do you? You have a rook to move. Rook C4 from here. The passer runs another step. Rook C2, King G7, and from here G5 is played. So the structure is going to change now on the king side slightly. What would White do if Black just shuffled? Rook C4 to C2, for instance. How can you make progress as White? Let me show you. Let's say Rook C4 was played here. Bishop to F6 would be very strong. Let's say the rook falls back like this. There's Rook D4, which would carry 2 mating ideas. A mate in 1 with Rook F4. And there's this other one, a mate in 2 threat. Let's say the mate in 1 was defended. Yeah, here's the mate in 2. G4, chop, re-chop, and that's a mate. So you can't just continually shuffle here as Black. After king to G7, Black tries to change the structure, maybe carve out a new square for the king. Pawn takes, king takes follows, and from here we have bishop to B6, paving the way for C7, just a step away with that passed pawn. Not the only winning approach. Computer likes bishop F6 as best, followed up with Rook D4, yet again looking for a checkmate on F4. But this is a fine approach as well. Bishop B6, pawn runs, Rook C3, Bishop A5. Ju Wenjun did not have a whole lot of time right around this stage here. Pretty much down to about a minute, living off of the increment. Let's see the approach. King now going to F8, Bishop D5, and the follow-up here, King to E7. So this is a top move. This pawn here is poison. In the game, what's tried here, H4. What would be the story if Black captured on F3? Well, there would be this check on F6, and after King G4, only one winning move, Rook F4. Beautiful deflection there. Rook takes rook, the pawn promotes straight away, and it hits with check. So this pawn right here, after King E7, this pawn right here, poison. Black's try from here is with H4, check inserted, King E5, careful where you go with the king. If you go to G5, you're running into mate. Bishop D2 check, Rook H6 would be checkmate. King E5, pawn takes pawn. Second passer now present. It was difficult enough trying to hold up this passer. Now there's a second one to worry about. What do you try here? Bishop E6 on board. Okay, but the H pawn is super fast. Just continues to run. Rook C5. You don't have to react to this threat. In the game, it's H6. If rook takes bishop here, we take the bishop with check, and next up promote. So bishop C8 in this game, and after another step here, H7, Black resigned. Beautiful endgame play here by Ju Wenjun. This king, without question, star piece in this opposite color bishop ending. Look at this king in this game, traveling primarily on dark squares, one little pit stop there on light, but eventually sneaking in behind enemy lines and that really paved the way for the win in this ending. It was not enough for black to have very good pieces. Addressing that white king's entry was very important. That timely rook e2 to e4 move, was not found, and very nice endgame technique here. Anyhow, what are your thoughts with this one? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.